I hope she passes away before the wedding so I don't have to deal with her anymore. The words hit me like a physical blow, freezing my hand over the stack of vendor invoices spread across my kitchen table. I was 68 years old, a widow of 3 years, and I had just heard my beloved granddaughter wish for my passing. Then I'd get the inheritance too and could plan the wedding I actually want. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. Madison's voice drifted from the living room where she thought she was alone, speaking casually on the phone as if discussing weekend plans rather than my demise. The invoice in my trembling hand was from the florist, $3,000 for arrangements I'd personally selected, thinking we were creating memories together. How naive I'd been. I set down my pen and listened, my heart hammering against my ribs as the conversation continued. Every word was a knife twist, revealing the depth of deception I'd been blind to for months. Grandma keeps trying to give her opinions about everything. So embarrassing. My friends keep asking why she's so involved in planning my wedding. The casual cruelty in her tone made my stomach lurch. This was Madison, the little girl I'd raised when her parents worked double shifts, the teenager I'd supported through her first heartbreak, the young woman I'd offered to make dreams come true for. And she was discussing me like I was a burden to be disposed of. But those first devastating words kept echoing. I hope she passes away before the wedding. I remained perfectly still, hardly breathing, as more of Madison's true feelings spilled out. Each revelation painted a picture of manipulation so complete, so calculated, that I began to question everything I thought I knew about my own granddaughter. I wish she'd just pay for it and stay out of it, Madison continued, and I could hear her pacing. She always paced when she was getting worked up about something. And honestly, sometimes I think about what it would be like if she just wasn't around anymore. Like if she passed away tomorrow, I wouldn't have to deal with all her opinions and interference. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My own granddaughter wasn't just complaining about me. She was actively wishing I was gone. The girl I'd loved unconditionally for 24 years saw my passing as a convenient solution to her problems. I mean, I know it sounds terrible, but think about it. Madison's voice grew more animated, excited even. If she passed away before the wedding, I wouldn't have to deal with her trying to control everything, and I'd inherit whatever money she has left. There it was. Not just a passing wish, but a calculated assessment of the benefits my demise would bring her. I gripped the edge of the table, feeling dizzy as the full scope of her betrayal became clear. She's got to have at least $1 million saved up. She owned that restaurant for 20 years, plus whatever Grandpa left her. If she was gone now, I'd get all that money and could plan the wedding I actually want, not the one she's trying to force on me. I closed my eyes, seeing my entire relationship with Madison in a new, horrible light. Every hug, every thank you, every moment of apparent gratitude. Had it all been performance? Had she been calculating my worth while pretending to love me? God, Ashley, I know how awful this sounds, but honestly, I hope she passes away before the wedding so I don't have to deal with her anymore. Then I'd get the inheritance too and could plan the wedding I actually want. The repetition made it worse somehow. This wasn't a momentary thought spoken in anger. This was a carefully considered wish, repeated for emphasis. My granddaughter wanted me gone, and she wanted to profit from it. I stood on shaking legs and walked to my home office, my mind reeling with implications I was only beginning to understand. For months, I'd been planning what I thought was the wedding of Madison's dreams, spending my savings to give her everything she claimed to want. But apparently what she really wanted was for me to disappear. The filing cabinet where I kept important documents seemed to mock me. 20 years of running Evelyn's table had taught me to read contracts carefully, to understand the fine print, to protect my interests. But I'd failed to protect myself from the person I trusted most. As I pulled out the wedding contracts, every single one signed with my name as primary client, I began to smile for the first time in weeks. Madison had made one crucial error in her calculations. She'd assumed I was just a sweet, naive grandmother who didn't understand business. She'd assumed I was trapped by my own generosity, too kind-hearted to ever protect myself from those who would take advantage of me. She was about to learn how wrong she was about her grandmother. The contracts spread across my desk told a clear story. Maple Ridge Country Club, Elegant Events Catering, Morrison Photography, Bella Flora Designs. Every vendor relationship was between them and me, not Madison. I wasn't just financing her dream wedding. I was the actual client purchasing services I could cancel at will. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "Thanks for everything, Grandma. You're the best. Can't wait to celebrate together in 3 weeks." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. 3 weeks. That's all the time I had left in her ideal scenario. 3 weeks before my passing would solve all her problems and deliver her the inheritance she'd already calculated down to the dollar. I typed back. "Looking forward to it, sweetheart. We need to talk soon about some final details." It wasn't a lie. We did need to talk. But the conversation would be nothing like what Madison expected. As I sat there surrounded by contracts worth $80,000, contracts that made me the decision maker, not just the funding source, I realized Madison had made another critical miscalculation. She'd told her friend Ashley that I was trapped by these agreements, that I was too sweet to ever take action that might hurt her. She was about to discover that 20 years of running a successful business had taught me exactly when and how to cut my losses. My granddaughter wanted me gone. She wanted to plan her own wedding without my interference. She wanted my inheritance more than my presence. I could arrange all three. The next morning dawned gray and cold, matching my mood as I sat in my kitchen replaying Madison's words. But beneath the hurt lay something harder. The methodical mind that had built Evelyn's table from nothing into a thriving business. I needed to understand how completely I'd been deceived. Opening my laptop, I began documenting everything with the same precision I'd once used for inventory and vendor relationships. If Madison thought she was dealing with a doddering old woman, she was about to learn otherwise. The pattern of manipulation stretched back further than I'd initially realized. When had Madison's behavior actually changed? When had genuine affection transformed into calculated performance? I pulled out my calendar and began marking incidents that had seemed minor at the time but now revealed themselves as part of a larger deception. 2 months ago, the florist meeting where Madison dismissed my suggestion about white roses, my wedding flowers as old-fashioned and embarrassing. Not just different taste, but active humiliation of my preferences. 6 weeks ago, the discovery that Madison had removed my closest friends from the guest list without consulting me. She'd claimed it was about fitting the vibe, but now I understood it was about eliminating witnesses to my generosity. 1 month ago, finding out Madison had scheduled vendor meetings without me, making decisions about thousands of dollars I was spending. She'd said I didn't need to be there for every little detail, but these weren't little details. They were major components of an $80,000 event. Each incident took on new meaning when viewed through the lens of Madison's true feelings. She hadn't been protecting my time or managing details. She'd been systematically excluding me from decisions about my own money while keeping me invested enough to continue funding her dream. The guest list revision was particularly calculated. By removing my friends, Madison had eliminated the people most likely to praise my generosity in her presence, forcing her to acknowledge my role in creating her perfect day. Without Ruth, Dorothy, and my other longtime friends, there would be fewer voices talking about how wonderful grandmother Evelyn was being. I called Ruth to apologize for the confusion about her invitation. "Oh, honey, I assumed there was some mistake," Ruth said, her voice warm with understanding. Madison seemed so distant when I mentioned how excited I was about the wedding. I thought maybe she was just stressed. "What exactly did she say to you?" There was a pause. "Well, it was a little odd. She said the wedding was going to be very intimate, and that she hoped I'd understand if they had to keep it to people who really knew the couple well. I've known that girl since she was born, Evelyn. How much better could I know her?" The dismissal was even crueler than I'd realized. Madison hadn't just excluded my friends. She'd made them feel unwelcome, as if their decades-long relationships with our family meant nothing. "Ruth, you were always supposed to be invited." Madison made changes to the guest list without my knowledge. "But don't worry, things are going to be different than expected. After hanging up, I continued my investigation. I called Patricia Davis, my banker, and asked for a complete analysis of my financial position. If Madison was calculating my inheritance value, I needed to know exactly what she thought she'd be getting. Evelyn, your liquid assets total just over $850,000, Patricia said. That includes the inheritance from your sister Margaret last month. Plus your house is worth about $300,000 and it's completely paid off. Over $1 million. Madison's estimate had been conservative, which meant she'd been researching my finances more thoroughly than I'd realized. How much did she actually know about my accounts? Had she been asking her father Christopher about my financial situation? The thought made my stomach turn. Had my own son been feeding information to Madison about my wealth? Was this conspiracy deeper than just my granddaughter's greed? I needed to know the truth. That afternoon, I drove to Christopher's office at the insurance company where he worked as a claims adjuster. He seemed surprised but pleased to see me, which either meant he was genuinely innocent or an excellent actor. "Mom, what brings you by? Everything okay with the wedding planning?" I studied his face carefully. "Christopher, has Madison asked you any questions about my financial situation? About what she might inherit someday?" His expression shifted slightly. Not guilt, but confusion. "That's an odd question. Why would you ask that? I need you to think carefully. Has she shown unusual interest in my finances lately? Asked about the restaurant sale, or William's life insurance, or Margaret's estate?" Christopher frowned, clearly trying to remember. "Well, she did ask me a few weeks ago about what you did with the money from selling Evelyn's table. She said she was worried you might be spending too much on the wedding, that she didn't want you to strain yourself financially." My heart sank. Madison had been researching my assets under the guise of concern for my financial well-being. The manipulation was even more sophisticated than I'd initially understood. "What did you tell her?" "I said you were comfortable, that you wouldn't have offered to pay for the wedding if you couldn't afford it. I told her about Margaret's inheritance because I thought it might ease her mind to know you had that cushion." Christopher paused, looking worried. "Mom, is something wrong? Did Madison say something inappropriate about money?" The innocent concern in my son's voice convinced me he wasn't part of any conspiracy. Madison had been using him, extracting information through feigned worry while planning to benefit from my death. Let's just say I've learned some disturbing things about Madison's real feelings regarding my involvement in her wedding. What kind of things? I almost told him then, almost shared the devastating truth about his daughter's death wish. But something held me back. Christopher would be torn between defending his daughter and supporting his mother, and I didn't want to put him in that position until I decided how to handle the situation. "I need to think some things through, son. But tell me, when you think about Madison's behavior lately, has anything seemed off to you?" Christopher considered this seriously. "She's been stressed about the wedding, definitely. Sometimes she seems overwhelmed by all the planning and sometimes she seems, I don't know, frustrated. Like the wedding is becoming more complicated than she wanted." "Frustrated with whom?" "I assumed with the whole process. Wedding planning is stressful, especially when it's as elaborate as what you're giving her." He paused. "She did mention once that she felt like she was losing control of her own wedding, that too many people had opinions about everything." "Too many people? Meaning me?" "Christopher, if you had to describe Madison's attitude toward me lately, what would you say?" My son looked uncomfortable with the question, which told me everything I needed to know. He'd noticed something but had been trying to ignore it or rationalize it away. "I think she's grateful but maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by how involved everyone is in the process. You know how independent she's always been. Having such an elaborate wedding means accepting a lot of input from people." "A lot of input from people." He couldn't bring himself to say that his daughter was